This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the lead director for BRVO Mining, Dr. Nicole Adshead-Bell. Nikki, it is great to have you on. How are you today?
I'm very well, and it's a pleasure to be on. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I am glad to have you on. I am biased as always. I always like to get that out of the way. I always joke that I wouldn't be speaking with anyone on or off the record if I didn't have a bias. And in this case, I'm biased because one, I'm a shareholder of BRVO Mining, but two, frankly, when I look at opportunities in the resource space, I always look at mitigating the risk, right? Anytime I'm allocating capital, my very first question to myself is, how can I mitigate the risk? What is the downside? So when I look at a project that's got a historic resource that's already robust, metallurgical work that's already, proven that there isn't a fatal flaw. When I look at the kind of team that exists and I see that the team that's been put together has been serially successful, not just individually, but as a collective group in the part of the world where this project is being developed, I'm looking around and it's honestly one of the better opportunities that I've come across in quite some time as a speculator. And so I wanted to have you on to explain to the audience why I believe this Luanga project, one, is undervalued, two, will be recognized by the market soon. But before we get to all of that, you have an incredible track record of success. And I want to start there. You're the lead director, as I mentioned, and anybody that's been in the space for any amount of time knows your background. But I suspect we're going to have quite a few eyeballs to the story. And I would love for you just to introduce yourself a bit and speak to your background a bit. And then let's talk about the team in a second.
Sure. Well, I'm biased as well. I'm also a sizable shareholder, so we'll caveat the conversation with that. Yes, so my background is geologist originally before turning to the dark side, as my geological peers describe me. I was born, educated in Australia, moved to Canada, worked for a junior in Canada, so I got a very good understanding from an into the trenches perspective of how that side of the business works, and then went to work for a precious metals fund, and then worked as an investment banker, then back to a precious metals fund, and then left in 2015, really focused on making investments under my own company, but also joined a number of boards. And so how I really got exposed to this, and I had absolute fortune for the founder, the largest shareholder, the key behind this, guy behind this story, Luis Azevedo. How I got to know him was I was a non-executive director of a company with a large open pit gold mine in the northeast of the country, and it was ASX listed. And I ended up becoming CEO of that company, and it was a company that was under a lot of stress, had a very stretched balance sheet. There were operational issues, and what we managed to achieve, and it was really due to the leadership of our in-country team. And what I brought to the table was I recognized the talent of that team, and we turned and stabilized operations. We fixed up our distressed plant expansion, and we ended up financing that company via M&A because we needed a hefty amount of money to fix the balance sheet. And we've seen in our sector these death by 1,000 cut financings of companies that are in operations, that they don't fix the balance sheet, and all they do is kick the tire down the road. So I came away from that experience. We sold the company for a 69% premium, which is pretty good given the shape of the company. And then I thought, well, I'd love to be involved in Brazil again, but with something that didn't have the challenges that were a product of decisions that I didn't make, because I love Brazil. I fell in love with the country. The people are incredible and incredibly skilled. Mining workforce, more engineers, mech guys, geos than Australia and the States and Canada combined. Incredible natural resources and almost every commodity you can think of. There's a world-class deposit, yet I think underappreciated by the market. And there's been a few failures or a few less than stellar performers. And when you dig into why those assets or companies have underperformed, it's not a country issue. It's always a management of your business in that country issue. And I felt, having gone through a fairly tough set of circumstances with Bedell, that there was a real opportunity to do things right as long as you were backed by a very good Brazilian team and you recognize the power of local knowledge and local expertise. So I spent 2 years trying to get a gold project out of a mid-tier gold company, failed, and in hindsight, fortunate that I failed on that, because Luis Azevedo, who is the executive chairman and CEO, founder, largest shareholder of this company. I knew him from my Bedell days because he was a founder of a very, very successful boutique law firm that specializes in mining. And he too was a geologist originally before turning to the dark side. And so Luis reached out to me in December last year and said, look, Nikki, I've come across this project. I've got now ownership of it. I'd love to list it in Canada and I'd really like for you to be involved. Would you consider it? And so he sent me a CA, signed the CA, read about the project, and then contacted Luis and said, not only do I want to be involved, you can't change your mind because I'll stalk you until you allow me to be involved. And so what's happened, and this is a rare thing, it's the first time I've ever been involved in building something from the ground up. And so it's quite different when you're involved in helping shape the culture and the strategy and bringing a good group of people together to, as you said, this is a high-risk business and we can all choose where to allocate our capital. But in my experience, if you don't have the right people, it's the most important ingredient. And so we then assembled a best-in-class board. Stephen Quinn, I'm sure you know Stephen Quinn, awesome mining entrepreneur. He's very well known in the sector. His ethics and his culture and his strategy overlies with Luis and mine, and then the two other directors that joined the board. Between this board, I mean, we cover basically every single aspect of the mining industry that you want to see. It's a board that is very diverse in mining sector experience. I think diversity is a word that's unhelpfully chucked around right now. But between this board and the senior management team, we've explored for, we've permitted, we've developed, we've financed, we have built, we've operated mines not only elsewhere in the world, but specifically in Brazil and specifically 50 kilometers away from the location of Luanga. So appropriate experience, well, we're very over-endowed with that. And that's a rare thing in our sector.
It's also a rare thing to have a board that has so many people involved that have monetized assets, right? I mean, it's a rare thing in the space to be able to take a project, develop it, build it, and or sell it. And it stuck out to me very, very early on that the goal here, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't just exploration to collect a check. It isn't just, exploration to say you're busy. It's to develop, it's to build, and eventually monetize the Luanga asset. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, I think ultimately at the end of the day, you need to have a strategy that delivers for all of your stakeholders. And I think this is a very, very rational board and management team. And as you said, it's a board and management team that has been involved the nascent stages of an evolution of a business through to executing on the sales side. So Luis and Tony Pugliese, one of our directors, co-founded a very, very successful Australian-listed company called Avunco. And they took, along with Simon Mottram, who's our president, he was the VP of exploration of Avunco, and they took the Antis asset, copper asset in the Carajás, pretty close to Luanga, and they took it from a discovery through to permitting, construction, and into production in 5 years. But that's unheard of in our sector. And then they were acquired for 100% premium by Oz Minerals. And I think the key to success in our sector is understanding where you are in the cycle, but also making appropriate decisions based on where you are in the cycle. And you see too many management teams that I think become a little bit blinkered, and then they don't have a strategy that works successfully based on what they have. And also they don't know, you always need to have an exit. You always need to be planning, and this asset will be built, and it will be built either with us or with someone else. And I think everybody involved in this, despite being a geo, I am not attracted to very early stage exploration stories. The risk is too great and it's binary. So to come across an asset, which Luis did, this is 100% due to Luis's in-country connections, the respect that he has in country and his long-term relationships, and the fact that he delivered in the Carajás. That's the entirety of the reason as to why this asset is coming to market. But as you said, it's an asset that was owned by Vale. It hasn't been recycled through numerous junior hands. And they spent a lot of time and effort. They discovered in the late 1990s. They drilled it out in the early 2000s, a very different commodity price environment. And then essentially it went into stasis under the company. And they've been going more recently through a divestiture process. And we and our current shareholders and future shareholders and our stakeholders get to benefit from that. And so this is an asset, how we describe it, and it's been a strategy, I think, that's been very well received in this very currently highly inflationary environment that we're in, is this is an exploration asset without the exploration risk, because there's a very, very large mineralized system, 7 kilometers of strike, that was broadly defined by Vale, and it's our job to go, well, how big does this get? And Vale, being in an iron ore district of the Carajás and looked at everything from an open pit situation, their drilling averages only 200 meters, and they have 3 drill holes that went below 200 meters, and those 3 drill holes ended in mineralization. And so their drilling didn't stop because mineralization stopped. They were just looking at this as a shallow, open pitable opportunity. And so with our recent IPO, we managed to raise a substantial amount of money, 40 million, plus our existing balance sheet. We're in this very fortunate position of having a very, very strong balance sheet with which to focus on delivering on exploration news over the next 2 years without having to tap the markets again. And it's a mistake too many juniors make, is I'll raise a bit now and then raise a bit in the future, and the share price never gets upwards pressure. So we have strategically tried to de-risk how the Wonga advances over the next 2 years. And then concurrently, because we think that this also is an asset that should ultimately be developed, and given Luis's skill set in the area, he's been involved in permitting 13 mines in Brazil. He really is the best in the business at this side of it. And as we know, as we look around the world, permitting is one of the biggest challenges, and it's not only a challenge to get permitted, it's a challenge to keep that permit. So we're concurrently doing baseline studies, and we're doing all the work that we need to do, that when we decide to pull that development trigger, it's at the right time in the market, and we can do that as rapidly as possible.
You have a market cap, the project has a market cap of roughly 175 million Canadian. 45 million of that is backed by cash. But as interesting to me is where the cash came from. And I want to talk a bit about the shareholder base, because there's some pretty impressive names on that shareholder roster. Can you just briefly kind of touch on that, Nikki?
Sure. So the big institutions came in during the IPO, but our strategy pre-IPO was to reach out to all of our connections in the business. And having come from the institutional side, we always found it pretty galling when companies would come to us at the IPO but hadn't had the courtesy to contact us pre-IPO. And it's all really about coming to them for the expensive round. So what we made between this board and management team, we have very, very good relationships, and I think based on mutual trust with institutional investors. So, for example, BlackRock, which is, and these investors have provided us permission to use their name. BlackRock was a very sizable shareholder of Avanco, and it was a great story, and Eddie Hambro speaks very favorably about Luis, and there's a lot of mutual respect between the two of them. And so when we reached out to BlackRock, as we did with a lot of institutions for our private rounds, they said, subject to their due diligence process, which was very, very extensive in nature, and frankly, we didn't think we'd get through it. They ended up owning 8% in our private round. And so what we wanted to do with the 50-cent round was to place that strategically. It's higher risk capital, obviously. It's generally at a lower price as to when you go public, but we wanted to ensure that went into hands that we felt would be able to benefit the company in the long term going forward. And we also got the Sprott group of companies in that 50-cent round, Matt Geiger from Geiger Capital, Paul Stevens, and a number of other well-known resource investors that really focus on this small end of the market. And I think that they saw the opportunities, they saw the team that we'd put together, and of course the quality of the asset. And then as we went public, in very, very difficult times, as someone in the industry has said to me, it's a miracle. I didn't think you guys could do it. And really, I don't think the average junior would have been able to raise the money at the valuation that we did. And what that speaks to are 3 key things. Confidence in the team. At the end of the day, people are the most important ingredient. Confidence in the project. It is very, very rare to come across a project that has all of these qualities. It's a very, very large mineralized system. It is incredibly well positioned in the Carajás in terms of its infrastructure, which it just reduces your cost of doing business. And not only if you become a development project, but even in this exploration phase, where an hour's drive from Parabecas, which is the mining center of the Carajás, it's got multiple big supermarkets. It's got 2 cat distribution centers. It's the source of skilled labor. So we're very, very well situated in terms of access, in terms of labor. And in this part of the Carajás, and we really, due to Vale's extensive investment in infrastructure in the last 40 years, we also benefit from a lot of power infrastructure. And so we're very, very well positioned. And in Brazil, there's some very challenging land status designation. And fortunately for us, we're not subject to this because the surface is privately held. It was deforested 40 years ago. So not only are we not cutting down trees in the Amazon, we have a program of replanting. And there's no communities living on site. There's no garimpero or mining activity. It's one of the most simple situations that I've seen from a land perspective. There's no major rivers running through. The topography is very friendly. You're in a high rainfall environment, which means you don't have a negative water balance. And as we know, water is a key issue around the world. It's almost a perfect layout as much as that you can have in our sector. So it's having seen probably 300 projects around the world over the last 22 years across every continent except Antarctica. It's incredibly rare to see one of them of these qualities. And so I think all of those elements allowed us when we were doing our pre-marketing and then our IPO marketing to attract funds that are the best in the business, that take a really long-term view. They're very well-known resource investors, including Franklin, Steve Land at Franklin. He was a large investor in Chalice, which was this amazing Australian PGM success story that had a discovery a couple of years ago and went from 20 cents to $10 last year and got a $3 billion valuation. And so I think he saw hallmarks just between the potential with our asset base. And then Tembo Capital, they are very long-term, very, very sophisticated resource investors. They do a lot of due diligence before they invest in anything. BlackRock, I think, needs no introduction, the largest fund manager in the world. And then, of course, RCF, and RCF, again, are very specific resource investors. So I think we're fortunate enough to have this base of resource investors that take, institutional investors that take a very, very long-term view, and they understand the risk-reward proposition. And I think that I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that this is a pretty unique opportunity.
You mentioned Chalice having a multi-billion-dollar valuation, right? And I mentioned that Luanga is currently being assigned, roughly $175 million valuation. It's a very similar project. Is that the analog, or is that an analog?
Well, of course, we always compare ourselves to Chalice. That's the valuation that we want. So there is a bit of a selective comparison there. Look, their deposit is a little bit different in the sense that they don't have rhodium. And so not all PGM deposits are created equal in terms of their commodity mix. And so their deposit is palladium rich, as is ours. They have platinum and gold, as we do. And they also have nickel and copper and cobalt, whereas we have palladium rich, which is we have platinum, we have gold, we have nickel, but we also have rhodium. And interestingly enough, as we were doing our marketing, a lot of the institutional investor interest and focus was on rhodium. Most rhodium supply comes out of South Africa. Not all PGM deposits have rhodium. So we have this, as we like to say, this commodity mix for everybody. We have the PGMs, which some people look at as precious metals, some people look at as more of an industrial metals, given that they're used predominantly used in internal combustion engines in terms of reducing emissions. And then nickel, there's this whole green thing that's been playing out on nickel in terms of the build out on the battery sector and the EV sector. And so whatever you want, if you want to be exposed to green metals or if you want to be exposed to precious metals, we feel like we have it all in this commodity mix. And I think one of the reasons why rhodium has been such a focus, it's a very, very volatile priced commodity. So the current price is around $15,000 an ounce. So you don't need that much rhodium to have a pretty big economic kick to your project. And it hit as high as $30,000 an ounce last year. And that was really around these concerns about PGM supply coming out of Russia. Russia is the predominant supplier of palladium. About 40% of global supply is out of Russia. And also South Africa with the inherent political risk, given that most PGMs come out of South Africa and Russia.
There's an ongoing phase 1, 25,500 meter drill program that is happening as we speak. I think there's 6 rigs on site, and you had some news this morning. And look, I'm not a geologist and I don't have a PhD. We can't all be Nickies, right? But you had some news. You had some news this morning that I think might be game-changing news if it actually is followed up with the drill rig. But do you want to touch on that a little bit? There was an intercept of massive sulfide mineralization that hadn't been seen, despite the fact that this project has seen a lot of drilling, right? By Vale, not by a junior, not by, some company that's looking to cash a check, but by a major mining giant. And so can we talk about the news from this morning?
Sure. It is very, very exciting. I was joking with someone this morning that Luangwa appears to be the gift that keeps on giving. Luangwa is what you call low sulfide system. It doesn't have a lot of visible sulfide. The spectacular, the pretty shiny stuff that everybody reacts to. So as far as we're aware, nothing of this style of mineralization has been intercepted by Vale until what we intersected today. So we did release last week, ahead of Rick Will's conference that we attended in Florida last week, just an example, because we wanted to show the different styles of mineralization at the conference and have some core. And that was semi-massive sulfide mineralization. Again, very unusual. It's not something that we see at Luangwa. And then the hole that was intersected, which is quite a distance from any previous historic Vale hole, we haven't seen this before, and it's very, very exciting stuff. As someone said, you can't find the gang mineralogy, i.e. the waste, you can't see that in the photographs of the core. So it is massive sulfide and semi-massive sulfide mineralization. We're seeing a lot of pentlandite, which is a nickel sulfide mineral. We're seeing chalcopyrite, and this is a low copper system. We haven't seen that much chalcopyrite before. So obviously we need to wait for assays. But we felt, given the tenor of the intercept, obviously it's pretty exciting. Geologists start talking about things. Insiders want to be in a position to be able to go into the market and buy that. It behooved us to do that because we felt it was material. And it's very, very exciting. It's a potential game changer. So our job is, over the coming months, is not only just to drill out Luangwa, this massive mineralized system, so 7 kilometers of strike. To put that into context, Chalice is 10 million ounces. That's only over 2 kilometers of strike. And they put plus 250,000 meters, over 500 holes into an ore body that's a strike length of 2 kilometers versus our 7 kilometers. So basically we have an awful lot of room to be able to infill and understand how big the system is. And so to intercept massive sulfide there's lots of questions over that. So is this a potential sulfide ponding? Is it a feeder zone? There's a whole, it's our job to understand what it actually is. So we're at the very, very early stages. It's a new style of mineralization. It is massive sulfides. It's our job to ensure that we have at least one drill rig focused on seeing how big this is. So in this kind of, when you have massive sulfides, you also want to start using geophysical techniques, so downhole EM. So the team on the ground is obviously immediately ensuring that we can start doing that process. We've placed the hole to allow us to do this. And what EM does is it helps you focus as what direction that you should be drilling because of the type of style of mineralization. It's very, very exciting. We're very excited about it. This deposit it's fantastic. I honestly haven't seen too many deposits like this in my experience, and I've seen quite a few.
I feel better informed. Smarter is the word I was going to use. I also feel happier as a shareholder because, frankly, I was happy just to have the 6 rigs proving up that historic resource and adding to that, right? And so obviously that was in progress and going very, very well. But again, the news from this morning, I couldn't be happier as a shareholder. So congrats on that. I can't wait to see the follow-up work that goes into proving up what it means. This has been a phenomenal discussion, Nikki. I mean, you have the right team. You definitely have the right asset. You have a team that knows what it's doing and knows how to get things done in this part of the world. The share structure is excellent. The shareholder base is phenomenal. And best part of it for me as a shareholder is, again, I think the asset right now is significantly undervalued given the state of the markets, but I don't think that's going to last. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
I think you said it better than I could possibly have. Absolutely. It's an asset. It's an asset of unusually high quality. And so how big does it get? We don't know the answer to that yet, but it's going to be pretty exciting finding out.
I'm looking forward to visiting the project when there is an opportunity to do so and the schedules coincide. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much as well. And thank you to those of you who will hopefully be listening to this at some stage.
All right, we'll chat soon. Lots of news flow coming.
That's true. Chat soon. Appreciate it.
Hey everybody, Gerardo Del Real here. If you're enjoying the content that you just saw, you can let us know in 3 simple steps. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please share across your network and on social media. Take care, everybody.